Hello, this is Mike from Dimensional Walking, and today I'm going to do a two-parter, and this is going to be on Dulce Underground Base, the key players of this high strangeness. Okay, and I may change the title on it when I finally put this on YouTube, but that's what we're going to do for now on that title. So first of all, I want to give a shout out to Norio Hayakawa, who's a good friend of mine, who's done a ton of research on what we're going to call the key players of this strange uh, place, I guess we'll call it. And Norio's done a lot of research. I've done some of my research, but today we're going to talk about a lot of Norio's research on the subject, and I think you will enjoy it. And this is basically, again, the key players in the mix. This again will be a two-parter. I'll do part of the players on this episode and the rest of them on the last episode. So, to say the least, Dulce Underground Base is a really strange, controversial thing, conspiracy type thing that's been around for quite a while. The period we're going to talk about basically is 1979 through 1983. And this is when all these players kind of were in the mix. I'm not gonna tell you or pretend to tell you that I believe all their stories. I know Norio probably has some pretty skeptical feelings on some of them, although he's met several of them, and I think he feels pretty strongly that what they're saying very well could be true. So, anyways, let's get started. So, one of the biggest, I will call it the biggest elephant in the room, I think, is Paul Bennewitz. Okay. And Paul was the owner of Thunder Scientific Corporation, which was a contractor at Kirkland Air Force Base. And by the way, I'm wearing my glasses today, just so you know, because I'm gonna read some of this material that I got from Norio through articles and conversations with him. So I'm gonna read some of it because it is pretty extensive, and I couldn't memorize everything. So if I look down occasionally, hopefully not too often, I'm probably reading some of the information. So please don't get discouraged by that. So, anyways, Paul Bennewitz, again, he was a contractor at Kirkland Air Force Base, which uh, his company was located right next to the entrance of Kirkland Air Force Base. And presently, the company is owned, as far as I know, at this point by his sons. Um, so in 1979, Paul Benowitz began to witness some strange lights hovering over Monzano underground nuclear storage area. Not too far where his house was, by the way. And I've driven by his house. Um, and I believe his wife still owns it and lives there. I'm not going to tell you that's absolute for sure because it's been a few years since I've been in Albuquerque. Anyways, the residence is in what they call the Four Hills area, which is a very nice area of Albuquerque next to the Kirkland Air Force Base. So there are some researchers, Greg Bishop being one of them, who I know. Well, I met Greg several times. Theorized that that Benowitz was looking for some tests of a project called Project Starfire, which is basically a laser-based optical tracking system, which was being developed at the time at Sandia Labs. So, and basically, the Sandia Labs, of course, is part of if you don't know, is part of Kirkland Air Force Base, the property. It's separate, but they work very closely together. Let's put it that way. So there was this other thing that was going on. Also, there was these tests that were some prototypes of unmanned aerial vehicles or UAVs were also being developed at the same time at Sandia Labs. So there's two things going on. I think Benowitz possibly was looking at the possibility he was actually witnessing one of these two projects. Okay. So Paul, and we're just going to say Paul from now on, later became convinced that these objects were somewhat related to the underground base in Dulce, New Mexico. So at that time he started doing some appearing some newspaper articles in the Albuquerque Journal and Albuquerque Tribune. Um, and we're starting to talk this up a little bit about the base and about these projects, etc. And there's a lot, there's books written on it. I think Greg Bishop did a pretty decent book on it. And there's several other ones I believe that are mentioned in it. And of course, I mentioned Paul Bennewitz in several of the videos I've done in the past on the Dulce Underground Base. Um, but Paul, at some point, and we don't quite know, I don't think anybody quite knows what caused it. He started suffering a kind of this whole paranormal and paranoia thing, and it was probably a little bit paranormal also. And he was later institutionalized. Um, and again, there's more to the story, and I'm not going to be able to tell you the whole story about Paul Bennewitz, but he later passed away in 2003. And I guess his remains are, and Noriel kind of mentioned his remains are buried in the Veterans Cemetery in Santa Fe. Um, and Paul Bennewitz's sons, who know a lot about what was going on with him, seem to have refused to do interviews. And I think one of the main reasons is it makes sense to me, and Norio mentions this, is that because his two sons were still doing business with Kirkland Air Force Base, that they thought it would be probably best not to say anything or do interviews or talk about all the underground base stuff and all those other conspiracy type things. Okay. So because let me just say this, they sold military grade humidifiers and calibration instruments to the base and probably Sandia Labs also. So Paul Bennett's wife, Cindy Bennewitz, again I mentioned she probably still lives, at least when I was there, and I think Nora mentions it too. um, Actually at the same place they lived before, which is in the alleged close to where the underground nuclear storage facility was in Fort Hills. So, so the next person that was Paul Bennewitz, and he had a lot to do with the knowledge and speculation and all this stuff about the underground base. Okay. There's a whole lot more to his story. Again, if you're interested in Paul Benowitz, go out there and look for some of the books that are out there about him. Some of them I think are very good. I think Greg Bishop's book is exceptional. Then there was another person called Mina Hansen, and she claimed that she was abducted, alien abduction, near Cimarron, New Mexico. And she claims that she was taken to an underground location. Okay, Paul Benowitz interviewed her at his home together with Leo Sprinkle, who did a hypnotic regression on her. Paul later decided that she must have been taken. Right? He speculated, but for some reason he thought she was taken to a underground base in Dulce, New Mexico. Um, this was allegedly only after Benowitz began to suspect that there was a base in Dulce. Okay, um, he through all this stuff he was seeing by from his house close to the base, he derived that this base existed. And I think if you go into the story a little bit more, he was hearing signals, he was hearing things on a radio he had that led him to believe that this base existed, and he believed that Mrs. Hansen, she was taken there. Okay, so it was just kind of building. Okay, it was building this evidence that this base existed and that uh, humans were being abducted and taken to this base. Next, a guy named Tom Adams. Tom, he was investigating cattle mutilations in the late 1970s. Uh, Tom first heard of the Dulce base from Paul Benowitz. Okay, and from the newspaper articles that Tom had read. So Tom allegedly knew somebody named Ann West. Okay, Ann West is the next person we're going to talk about. Okay, I think you're going to find out there's a whole this whole subject is really complex, very very controversial, and there's quite a few moving parts here. Okay, how they all fit together, I don't think anybody really knows. But I want to. The reason I'm doing these two videos is to just get some of these key players out there and during that time frame. Okay, that I talked about. So Ann West, her true identity has never been confirmed. At least this is from some information Norio gave me. Although somebody named Tal Levis, let me make sure I got the name right. Tal Leveski, okay, there you go. Claims that she was on the Facebook, but had a different name. So, and alleged to have been an acquaintance of Tom Adams, claimed to have drawn the initial pictures of the vats in the Dulce base. So this, just so you know, there was supposedly vats that there was they were growing hybrids or some kind of a maybe a human alien being in these vats. And you've probably seen pictures of these vats, and sometimes they just use them in a general conversation about alien underground bases. But the original, I believe, the original picture that she drew was from possibly from Dulce Underground Base. So Tal uh, Leveski, he claims to have known the kind of this the I want to know more of the famous people, key players, I will call them, Thomas Edwin Costello. Okay, and I've written about him quite a bit. He's a very interesting character, and whenever I post something about him, we get a lot of views. Okay, I'm not really sure why, but I think it's just he's just a very strange kind of character, and he's talked about the base quite a bit, and I think he's even had some pictures on the base when he worked there, so allegedly worked there. So, anyways, this Tal guy claims he had that she visited him and his wife, and also visited Thomas Edwin Costello. Okay, so this is supposedly people that actually met this person, Tom Costello. Okay, and there isn't many people that claim that. Okay, this guy's kind of this weird enigma that I could never find anybody that had talked to him, but supposedly uh, this Tal uh, actually, with Ann West, actually met this person. Then later on, for some reason, Leveski claimed that Ann West was dangerous and is a part of an invisible government. Okay, now, I don't know if there's more detail about this. I'm not for the first time looking through this material that Noril had put in articles. That was the first time I ever heard of Ann West. Okay. But, anyways, they claim that she was dangerous and was part of an invisible government. Okay. Next person. And this one I think everybody knows a little bit about John Lear. So, John Lear heard about Dulce allegedly from Ann West. Uh, and he befriended and then also befriended this Tal Leveski through John Grace, I'm sorry, who is AKA Val Valerian. Okay. According to Tal, John Lear retouched the uh, Dulce drawing of Ann West. Okay. So it means he was playing around with the drawing, changing some things on it, supposedly. So it's getting really intriguing. Okay. He first came up with his hypothesis in 1988 about Dulce and also about Area 51. John Lear has never been taken seriously by the UFO community. I mean, I think there's a lot of people in the UFO community that have believed a lot of the stuff that John Lear has said, but there's plenty of them that haven't. I know people that are very much negative on the stuff John Lear has said. So I'm not I'm on the fence, just so you know. So some people suspect that John Lear purposely throws in some ridiculous sounding items such as psyops. He recently claimed that there are cities on the backside of the moon. I don't think anybody right now will know that. Understand that the Chinese are going to are sending something as we speak to the other side of the moon, and who knows if they'll find cities there. I don't really know. Probably our government knows there is cities on the back of the moon, if there are cities on the back of the moon. So, anyways, so John Lear was somewhat involved, supposedly. Okay, okay. So now let's talk about a guy that I've mentioned a few times. This Tal Leveski. Okay, and he was. I guess that name again may not have been a real name. He's AKA Tal or Jason Bishop. Okay, so we got the names are like changing as we go. But anyways, we'll just call him Tal from now on. He claimed that he worked in Santa Fe as a security person for a private company around 1980 or 1981. He claimed to have begun contact with Miss Costello, who Tal claims worked in the same company in Santa Fe. Okay, there you go. And Thomas Costello allegedly revealed his secrets to Tal. Okay, so here we go. The secret was that there was an underground U.S. alien biolab under Archuleta Mesa. By the way, in many of the conversations I've had with people in Dulce, New Mexico, was that it's actually the Archuleta Mountain and not the Archuleta Mesa. Just a little side thing. I was pretty convinced that it really was in a different location, slightly different. It's close by, but a slightly different location. And of course, it's next to Dulce, New Mexico, which again, Norio did, believe, two um, conferences there. I was with Norio on one of those conferences at his first conference there, and it was really pretty profound. And I've done videos on it. It was really interesting. Um, and of course, Tal said that he had worked at this as a security person at that facility, at the underground base, basically. But before coming out with this Thomas Costello story, Tal also seemed to have heard initially about the Dulce base rumors from reading about Paul Bennewitz. So Tal, who apparently met Costello, got a lot of his information from Paul Bennewitz. So, like I say, Paul Bennewitz is kind of this big elephant in the room because he comes up all throughout this thing. Okay. Um, so Tal claimed that he was visited by a tall reptoid at his house in Santa Fe in 1979. Okay. So I'm going to stop part one right here. Okay. And we're going to pick up and we're going to talk a little bit more about Thomas Costello uh, and some of these other characters, some of these other people that were the key players that I believe and Norio believes and other people believe are part of this whole complex thing called Dulce Underground Base. So we will look forward. I hopefully you follow me on part two, but that's the end of part one, and we'll see you then. Bye bye.